Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, and I'm here to do a Dark Shadows video for you guys tonight, rewriting the 2012 Dark Shadows movie. My biggest issue was where to begin with this, because the easiest answer is Barnabas. Before I do, I think it's important to note that for me, at least from my perspective, and maybe you guys differ on this, and if you do, please let me know. I think Dark Shadows, in order for it to be made into a film, needs to be more than just one. Look, though my favorite film is Night of Dark Shadows, Dark Shadows has only had three motion picture films. Three. Um, Now, you could make the debate that Night of Dark Shadows is a sequel to House if you wanted to. My buddy Mark Gilman brought that to my attention. Huge shout out to him. Um, so to me, Dark Shadows should be a three-film set. The first film should be your introduction point of whoever, where you're starting your story. The second is the in between, and the third is the end. Now, where do I start this? Well, quite simply with Barnabas Collins. I mean, not just with him though, but with his family. I, the first Dark Shadows movie should be 1795. I mean, if you're going to do Dark Shadows, do it because it's just one of the most fascinating stories in the Dark Shadows series. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but if I had to pick one, that would be my one I would start with. Now, would this be the 1795 story we love and know? Not exactly. For me, this story would start off not with necessarily Barnabas, but with Josette coming to, well, America, coming to Collinsport on a ship that's, going through the rocky seas of the Atlantic and going through the storms. And finally, her, Angelique, um, her father, Andre, I believe is his name. And, if you want to have Aunt Natalie, have an Aunt Natalie come to Collinsport. Now, what would be the key changes? A couple things. Number one, and really, these changes aren't too big. I think the biggest change would be Joshua, but I'll get to that. Now, in the series, Joshua did run the business, but Jeremiah helped him. Jeremiah, in a sense, was his partner in many ways. Though he was his younger brother, they were more partners as well, in my view. Um, so here's Jeremiah in the 1795 story. He would run the business primarily, not Joshua. He would run the shipping business. What would Joshua be doing? I've said Dr. Joshua Collins. I would totally 180 Joshua's personality. This is a very caring man, a man who saves lives, a man who cares about his patients. So he has a wife, two kids, and Barnabas and Josette, a, a loving brother, and Jeremiah. Jeremiah can be pretty cold at times, but he does give a shit. So I would, again, won't flip the characters in many ways with that. What would be another big difference? Would Barnabas and Joe and Angelique have met prior to? Yes. The only difference is when they get to America, Josette doesn't know it's the Collins family. She doesn't know it's Barnabas Collins. Sort of like with the series, but more of a twist where she's shocked it's him. She's like, oh my god, that's the man I made love with on in Martinique, right? So, and she tells him, she goes, I thought it was me you loved. He goes, that was so long ago. He goes, you remember that? He goes, so he goes, I love Josette. Sort of play off the series a bit. Now, here would be the big difference. Yes, Barnabas and Josette would actually make it to the altar. They would get married. The difference, Barnabas would get attacked on their wedding night by the bat. Obviously, Josh was a doctor. He tries to save his son who's laying in bed dying from vampirism. He tries everything. I mean, he's over his son's chest, giving him CPR, pounding him as his son's turning gray, telling him to breathe. I think, you could have so much emotion in this story instead of having what they did have. And that might sound simple to some. Sarah, again, Angelique curses the family, right? So Barnabas gets bitten, he gets buried. Sarah's sitting in the woods. Sarah would not die of pneumonia. Sarah would get shot in the shoulder by hunters who weren't even supposed to be on the property. Jeremiah catches the hunters who shot him. Like, what are you doing up here with these guns? Like, there's no hunting on this land. And they don't even realize what they were doing. Again, it's all part of the curse. Here's Joshua trying to save his now save his daughter. He removes the bullet, but not before gangrene sets in and kills her. And she just lasts long enough to see that Barnabas is risen from the dead. And Barnabas does hug her. He goes, just tell me who did this to you. Tell me. She names the hunters, and Barnabas kills the hunters that did it to her. Then Barnabas conf- not only confronts Angelique, he kills Angelique. But she warns him killing her won't stop the curse. And it doesn't. Josette does die. Okay. Now, does Josette jump off Widow's Hill? My thing is, you already have Widow's Hill established as a legend. So, I mean, it's too easy not to use. I would either use that or try to find a way where, because Barnabas couldn't do anything to help her because he's a vampire. I would try to find a way to set it up where perhaps maybe she stands trial for witchcraft. Maybe Josette does instead of having it be Vicky because there's no Vicky in this story. But you could still have her jump from Widow's Hill, again. There's that too. Now, what would happen? Sarah's gone. Jeremiah would actually start to figure out that the attacks in town are being caused by a person. And by this time, Joshua has figured out Barnabas is a vampire and he's trying to cure his son from this disease. He treats it like a disease, sort of like Julia does. And Barnabas tells him, Father, just kill me. Just end it. Kill me. Joshua thinks and thinks and thinks. The final straw is Barnabas killing his, having so much bloodlust he can't. It's so hard for him to control it that he bites his own uncle and kills him, drains of his blood. So Joshua's left with the choice of, do I still try to save my son or do I kill him? He goes to the coffin with one of the servants and he has a stake laid on Barnabas's chest. He has the mallet raised. And just as he's getting ready to slam it home, he throws it and shuts the coffin lid, chains up the coffin, and puts him in a mausoleum. And no one knows he's there. And puts him in a secret entrance. So what would the... But Joshua knows that the Collins family can't just continue. By the way, the Dupre family, after Josette's death, would have left. So we'll do the Widow's Hill thing. That's so hard to top, right? I think that's one of the hardest things to top of Josette. Is her death is so legendary of jumping off Widow's Hill. So why not just do that anyway? But they leave. This is obviously before Barnabas starts killing people and after Josette's death. So they leave. Joshua. This is where the Hammond family now comes in. Joshua knows he has to continue the Collins family legacy. He has no kids now. He has no family. So he goes to the Hammond family home and adopts two kids, one boy, one girl. And he names the girl Penelope and the boy Jameson. I switched one of the names, but I'm just adding some context. So now in the present, we'll set this in the 60s. We'll go from 1795 to 1967. Metal technology has changed in such a large way, right? Here's all these Collins family members that are alive and well, simply because they're not Collinses by blood. I mean, the curse was to affect the blood line of the Collins family. And it did. I mean, Joshua eventually died of it of old age. So here's all these new Collins family members. Here's your Elizabeth, Roger, etc., etc. And now you have people coming to visit the Collins family, and you have these paranormal investigators who want to search the grounds for, ghosts. They want to talk to the ghost of Josette, and there's legends that her ghost roams Widow's Hill, and they sort of at first scoff at them. One of the paranormal investigators has blonde hair, and really it's Angelique. And she's secretly trying to lead them to the mausoleum. She says, hey, there's something there, I bet. And they let Barnabas out. And he kills the paranormal investigators and grabs her. It's you. I killed you. She tells him, you'll never be rid of me. Ever. You're just gonna get rid of me. He goes, why would you do this to me? So now they're at odds with one another. But Barnabas doesn't know who to turn to. He can't very well trust her. So he puts a leap of faith in the family that does live in the great house. he tells the matriarch the truth for once about what happened to him. And at first she doesn't believe him. She goes, "You expect me to believe you're a vampire?" And he shows her by taking the crucifix to his hand. And she goes, I don't know what to do for you. I guess I could try to get help for you. And there are two very competent doctors who do try to help him in Stokes and Hoffman. And I think that's something you could have done too. There's also, again, there's also the other side of the coin of this too that I didn't even get into. So I started with that character, so I'll stop for Barnabas for a moment. So again, now this doesn't all have to be the same thing. So let's talk about Maggie Evans from the 2012 movie, how she could see ghosts. And I really like that because it is sort of from the old show and from 91 Revival, but look, there you had David who could see ghosts. Ghosts were a part of Dark Shadows. They were huge. So why not have a character who can sort of see them and talk to them and communicate with them? Now, I don't mind the parents committing her. That made me feel sorry for her. But the one thing I would have loved to have done, if they could, is have the phone ring and here's this man picking up, yes, Mr. Evans, your daughter has escaped from Cliff. There's your Cliff reference. If you want to show how she escaped, show that. That would be fine. There's sins that they do not do with this character. You could have had this girl sort of hiding along the countryside, and that's sort of another way of how she almost ends up in Collinsport, almost by herself. But what really guides her is the spirit of Josette sort of guiding her to Collinwood. I My favorite scene is the cafe scene where the ghost points to the newspaper, like, go here, go to Collinwood, which is really interesting. I do wish they would have capitalized on her ability to see ghosts a lot more. You could have also had her communicate with the widows and the other ghosts of Collinwood. There's so many things they could have done here that it's ridiculous. Is 2012 gonna win? Any awards? No, it was a horrible movie. And here's one thing I'll say too: are there other characters they could have sort of used proper? I've talked about Joshua. I've talked about Josette, Barnabas, Maggie. I don't. Would have Maggie have changed her name to Victoria Winters? It made sense, because again, she's in hiding. But again, if you have a proper story for her, like her actually escaping from a mental institution and actually going into hiding, then it does make sense that she changes her name. But, again, the 60s, it's not like there was like this big security like there is now. There's all this technology that we have where someone could check your identification easier. So she could just change her name and go with it. That's something I did like. It's like, okay, I get why you're changing your name. You're scared. You don't want to go back, and nor do you deserve to. You didn't deserve to be in there in the first place. Now, let's capitalize on this interesting character and have her communicate with the dead, with the spirits. How not just Collinwood, but all around. Who knows? Maybe that's something that becomes a job for her as well, where she's getting paid to talk to the dead. that is something they could have capitalized on in with that character. So the character of Willie Loomis, what would he have been? I would have really loved to have seen Willie Loomis be on the side of Angelique, actually be sort of working with her hand in hand. Like, oh, do you want me to kill one of the Collins family members? No, just keep your eye on them. Again, there's a lot of things you could do with these characters and sort of build this grander scheme of things to do. You could have also had not just Willie spying on the Collins family, but Willie spying on the Collins family enterprise, the fishing fleet, and its employees. Maybe Willie starts causing the employees to go missing. Maybe he murders them instead of murdering the family because Willie Loomis, though he works for Angelique, is so psychotic he's almost uncontrollable. That is an element you could have had. And that's just, there's so many things that, and I do hope one day we do get a proper modern take of Dark Shadows in the theater. I'm more excited about this potential television series. I think with the 2012 movie, when I think about it, I think about what it could have been. There was so many, there was so much of a possibility. And in all honesty, I agree with Christine Pierce that the score was really good. In fact, I would dare say the score of the 2012 movie was one of the better scores of the three films. I would put that first, Night of Dark Shadows second, and third would be House. I think, you know, again, there are things that could be better about a movie that is bad. What was the best part of the 2012 movie? It's sort of a tie between the sets and the soundtrack. The sets were really good. They weren't bad, and the soundtrack was really good. I I think the one thing that makes it watchable most is the performance of Michelle Pfeiffer and Eva Green. I think they did a phenomenal job performing off one another. Again, is the movie great? No, the movie's awful, but they do sort of salvage their own characters in their own way, which is something. So, what would my final be? My final would be that the Collins family do take a stand against Angelique and Barnabas, and they do sort of fight her off and win, only to run into another enemy who, by the end of this, they would have run into another enemy in the form of a a man who could turn into a werewolf. And again, you could have done that too. There's a lot of things you could have also done. Kalpatofe, as a follow up. You could have done Leviathan. There's a lot of interesting things they could have done. So I don't know if I did a good job on this video or not. I probably didn't. Gosh. All right. You guys have a good night.